rushing ahead to try to keep abreast of these events. So the flickers of Al-Qaeda and the lack of 100% insight. Well, we have 100% insight. We know that the top honchos are from Al-Qaeda and that the main military cadres of this effort are from Al-Qaeda. This also accounts for some of their problems, right? We know Al-Qaeda, what is it? Of course, we should just run that down for you briefly. The components of Al-Qaeda, because we're not changing anything that we've said about this in the past. Al-Qaeda is made up of fanatics, psychotics, dupes, misfits, mercenaries, drug addicts, criminals, mental deficients, other categories, tribalists in some cases. And they're led by who? By double agents. There are double agents in the middle of it. We can see this in Yemen. Let's just do the quick thing on Yemen. The Yemen civil war is what? We have a bunch of people who are shipped over by the United States from Guantanamo Bay concentration camp to Yemen. One of the key people is named Shiri, S-H-I-R-H-I. He's a Saudi, S-H-I-H-R-I. Shiri from Guantanamo Bay concentration camp, shipped over by the U.S. to Yemen. Humanitarian gesture? No, I'm afraid not. He was pre-programmed to become the head of a new group, Al-Qaeda, in the Arabian Peninsula, other Guantanamo Bay inmates. And, of course, Awlaki, the CIA lackey, Anwar Awlaki, the guy who has been used for sheep-dipping so many stupid patsies of the Al-Qaeda type. That would be the Fort Dick Six, the Toronto plotters, Major Hassan of Fort Hood, Hani Hanjour, the Christmas Mutala bomber, Times Square bomber, all these people, all mentally deficient or more or less, have been then put into touch with Awlaki, the CIA lackey, so the U.S. can come out and say triumphantly, aha, you see, Al-Qaeda. But now there's been a change. That's also that's basically the account of what's going on in Yemen. There was an attempted coup by General Mohsen, M-O-H-S-E-N. General Mohsen of Yemen, M-O-H-S-E-N, is the Tantawi equivalent, right? In Egypt, the real action was a coup d'etat led by Field Marshal Tantawi. Similarly, in Tunis, that was not that gaggle of students in the square. That was a military coup that drove out Ben Ali. Many accounts allow you to see that. In the case of Yemen, it's General Mohsen, M-O-H-S-E-N, very nasty fellow. That's the U.S. CIA candidate to oust Saleh, but it's being done with the help of this Al-Qaeda secret army. Now, the difference, however, is this. Under Bush and Cheney, the presence of Al-Qaeda was a ready-made excuse to bomb, to strafe, to invade, to destroy. This is what happened in Iraq, for example. They created Al-Qaeda in Iraq with this Zarqawi, who was taken out of the Ansar enclave, set up in some other digs. He proclaims eternal loyalty to bin Laden, and the U.S. can say, thank God, we can now say we're in Iraq to fight Al-Qaeda, just as the going was getting rough. But now it's different. Now, instead of using Al-Qaeda as the pretext, the excuse to attack, Obama uses Al-Qaeda as his own infantry. The idea is the U.S. is too broke, too overstretched, too hated, too isolated to be able to do it directly. But if you do it indirectly, you set up the Al-Qaeda branch in the country, you mobilize them, you can then say to people, look, hey, Europeans, come on in, give me the money, give me the help, give me the votes in the UN and elsewhere, in the NATO Council. And you can use Al-Qaeda as your infantry. Now, naturally, there are precedents for this, right? If you look at many armies around the world, they have had what you could call penal battalions, right? The Germans are famous, Strafbataillon, penal battalion. Stalin had famous divisions, some of them led by Marshal Rokossovsky, who were recruited straight out of the concentration camp or straight out of prison with the idea that once they got, say, into Western Europe, if they ever did, they would go wild, stealing and creating mayhem, with the idea that that would lead to a social breakdown. So when you deploy an Al-Qaeda-based army against a nation-state like Libya, what you're really saying is that you are perfectly happy if at the other end of the crisis there comes out chaos. Chaos based on tribes, chaos based on warlords, chaos based on criminal organizations. We have the example of the KLA-UCK group there in Kosovo, taking over Kosovo, carving that out of Serbia, carving Serbia. That's a good example for what is intended, I think, in in Libya. Now, let's just go through and give the general overview of what's being deployed in Libya. We've already talked about the West Point study. Remember, Libya provided 20% of all fighters crossing the Syria-Iraq border during the 2006-2007 period. The world capital of terrorism from those U.S. Captured records was Darna. Darna, the city of 50, 60, 70,000 people between Benghazi and Tobruk, gave more terrorists in absolute numbers than any city in the world, more than Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with 4 or 5 million people, more than anybody. Libya gave 20% of the total, but that's far out of proportion, right? Libya, a 6 million, 7 million person country. Saudi Arabia already 4 times that. Other countries, Egypt, 10, 15 times that number of people. But Libya, special status. So Darna was in the top 4, and Benghazi was in the top 4. And of the Libyans who indicated a preference, 85% preferred the suicide bomber method. So this is an indication of fanaticism. The history of that is the Senussi order. It is an irrationalist sect within Islam, similar to the Wahhabites, emerging in the 1830s and 1840s. It then became very popular in Cyrenaica, in precisely the Benghazi-Darna-Tobruk corridor. When the Italians took over Libya about 100 years ago or slightly more, the rebellion against the Italians was led by the Senussi order. They were encouraged by the British. The British got in touch with them, made the contacts, and after Mussolini had been gotten rid of and fascism, Italy defeated in World War II, the British took over Libya as a UN trusteeship territory, and they put in the head of the Senussi order, of this irrationalist cult, as the king of Cyrenaica first in Benghazi. This was King Idris I, and then they made him, he was emir of Cyrenaica, and then king of Libya, and he didn't want to be king of Libya. He said, Cyrenaica is what I care about, but Tripolitania, the other province, there are 2 provinces left over from the Ottoman Empire. One is Tripolitania, Tripoli, and the other one being Cyrenaica, Benghazi, Tobruk area. So King Idris I was put in by the British in the early 50s, and he was then kicked out by Gaddafi in the late 60s. So the resentment of the tribes of the Benghazi-Tobruk area, Darna, is that those Harabis and those Obeidats are the former monarchical ruling class, and they resent the Gaddafi tribes, be it the Qaddafa, the Warfala, the Mahagira, or the Fezan, who in the west, the center, and the south, who support Gaddafi against the monarchy. Now, this also defines the racism, because those tribes from Fezan in the southwest corner of Libya, a lot of those people are black or very dark. So therefore, the hatred, the racist hatred, anti-black racist hatred of the Harabi and the Obeidats goes against the Fezan. And this is the story of why there were so many people lynched and murdered and massacred at the beginning, when the line was that Gaddafi had armed black mercenaries. Well, a lot of those were simply workers from Chad and Mali in places like this, but a lot of them were simply decent Libyans, and Libyans who happened to be black. I guess the crime was being black in Benghazi. Being black in Benghazi was a capital offense under these racists of the Benghazi Rebel Council. And now we have our first black president, Obama, supporting genocide in that area against black people with the help of Susan Rice and all sorts of other people. Isn't that wonderful? Singing tomorrows and change you can believe in. So now let's just give a quick overview of this rebellion. What's in the field? There are basically four components. First, well, we'll have to wait now to the next segment to go through that, but we'll be back on World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything on Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter and Tarpley.net.